Go on, fellas. Get around the corner. Let's have a good go. Come on, then. You ready? Come on, you lot. Go on, then.
Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay.
Good evening, Imps fans. How we doing? I've had a little play with the light in here, and I still haven't quite got it right, have I? But here we are. We are live from the bar on a Monday night. The club have put a tweet out with eyes open, the big old eyes, so we know what might be happening. Keith Fletcher, he's already on board. He thinks he knows what's happening as well. Now, a little bit special tonight because I've actually got my first guest live, so I'm going to have somebody here chatting Lincoln City with me. I'm just looking at his feed down on the floor, and I got to see his carpet, his window, and his door. So that's interesting. You've heard me talk about my friend Pete quite a bit on the podcast. He's often cynical and cutting with me in the same way that I am with Ben. So this will be the first time he's got an opportunity to do that live on air. So Pete, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, good afternoon, mate. Not bad at all.
Good. Now, obviously, if there is an announcement, we can't talk about it until 5 p.m, assuming there is one, who knows. But obviously, there's been quite a lot linking the Imps to Theo Pasha today. And the reason that that's happened is basically Lincoln liked Indy 11. Indy 11 followed Lincoln. What do you kind of make of the mad internet rumours at the moment?
I mean, Lincoln's a great example of it. And it's any club, any old idiot can sit at home, tapping away, coming up with any old crap. If you make up enough rumours, you're going to get the odd one right. But 99% of the time, when you throw in mud at a wall, it doesn't stick, and it's just mental, absolutely mental. In the same way that fans lap it up as well. And again, it's the same across football. Lincoln's no different to anywhere else. Every club is exactly the same, but it's farcical, and there are elements of the modern game that I'm not a fan of, and it would be fair to say internet rumours and people that sit and make them up are right at the top of that list with, Sun journalists and people that write for the Daily Mail and things like that.
Obviously, I quote Alan Nixon a little bit as well, so yeah, I don't read the Sun. First of all, Kate thinks that you were a figment of my imagination.
I am, but I'm also a figment of Kate's now as well.
That's an awful thought. Right, so let's say we were signing somebody today, and let's say it isn't Theo Pasha from Indy 11, which is almost certain. What sort of positions do you think that we should be looking to fill?
Well, I mean, clearly there's going to be a second keeper at some point, because you can't go into a season with one keeper on the books, whether that's a number 1 or a number 13. But then that aside, defence is set, midfield 3 set, so wide option, number 9, number 10 seems to be the, you definitely need a backup number 9 or a starting number 9, depending on how you're looking at it. And George Grant's probably the only option at 10 at the moment. So I could imagine somebody that's, somebody's coming definitely to challenge for the 9 and 10 roles. And then Harry Anderson's probably the only player at the club that can play wide right. You're not going to go into the season with one wide right player, are you?
No. And let's say, just George has alluded to the fact that any signing that's made today inside the next 2 minutes, for instance, would be a permanent deal. Which sort of positions do you think you would be comfortable seeing loan players come in, and where do you think the permanent players should be?
Well, I mean, if you think about where Lincoln's success was last season with Tyler Walker, and I know Tyler Walker's not coming back, but the money that it would take to buy a number 9 of the calibre of Tyler Walker or of any other players who were on loan at Northampton Town last season is going to be beyond the budget of Lincoln or most League One clubs. So I would imagine that would make a lot of sense. If one of those 9/10 roles is going to come in with a starting forward, they're probably going to be on loan. Likewise, keeper. There's been an awful lot of successful keepers going out. You think about Kieran O'Hara, I've spoken about a lot on the pod, but he's a great example of it. Season at Macclesfield, season at Burton. You can get an awful lot of success with that type of player going out and playing week in, week out from a top-end football club. So I can see one of the attacking options and the keeper being loans, and then probably 1-2 permanent signings as well.
Excellent. Well, we're closing in on 5 o'clock now, which I'm told is the embargo time. But Ben's got a comment. Ben, obviously, will podcast co-host. He wants Pete to indulge in the cutting and biting remarks that I've just alluded to. So any cutting and biting remarks for me at the moment, Pete?
Gary, you're live on the internet, and B, you're sat in front of a mirror. It's you've got more than enough going on for yourself, I think.
Just as a bit of background, Pete and I were actually at school together, so we used to sit in GCSE maths, not doing any work, and talking about Lincoln City. So
one of the sixth formers.
yeah. We're going back to the whole. Did you heard the podcast the other day with the beard and the face mask?
I've had nightmare.
We went to a very interesting school. Right, so it's 5 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. The embargo was 5 o'clock, so let's get the banner up. The news is that Theo Archibald has signed for Lincoln City. I'll just take over from Pete for a second. Now, Theo Archibald basically is a wide player. He's left-footed, but he can play wide left or wide right. I've put sings for Lincoln City in the banners as well, so he may well sing for Lincoln City, but we will change that to signs before we go any further. So as I said, Archibald is left-footed. He was at Macclesfield last season where he scored 6 goals in 33 games. Prior to that, he was at Brentford where he played 3 times in the Championship, and he was on loan at Forest Green where he really impressed against us in a 2-1 victory that you may remember for being one of the few games John Akindi scored from open play. So I think Kellen Gordon got the winner that day. Archibald had a really good game and he stood out for me. He's played for Scotland under 21s. He suffered what could be described as kind of personal tragedy when he moved down here, because he moved to Brentford for a coach and a mentor who had gone to Brentford as well. So he'd kind of moved there to work under him. And it was literally a week or so after Forest Green played us that his coach passed away. And from then he kind of struggled for form at both Brentford and Forest Green. But he had a really good season at Macclesfield, terminated his contract there in March, was heavily linked with us. From March till now. It's been a really ongoing transfer saga. So here he is. We've got one of our wide players in. I'll pass over to Pete briefly for his opinion, and then we'll look at some comments.
Well, I think it's really important that you've brought in a wide option. I think, you've got Anderson, Albazette and Grant. You're probably covered in those regions now. So you're down to probably needing 3 more players prior to season kicking off. So squad is really beginning to take shape now. And it's going to provide real option. And if he's going to play on the right, there's a real chance that it'll either kick Anderson up the arse, or there's a starting option on the right ahead of him. Those are decent stats for Macclesfield last season. A team that was struggling, were a club in chaos, and he's still managing to pull that out the bag. There was an article, an interview we did with the Daily Record, where he talked about the fact stepping back down to Macclesfield to build his way back up again. So it's very clearly a signing that fits the model in terms of him coming in. I don't know if do you know how long the deal is, Gary?
I haven't. That wasn't on the press release, to be fair, so I don't know in terms of contract length.
Okay. But very much, if he signed a 2 or a 3 year deal, he has a great season. There's potential. He'll be thinking he can go back to a Brentford. And if that works for Lincoln, you've signed a player for nothing, plays a season, moves on for a decent fee, superb. And if not, you've got a great player who's got a great pedigree. Let's face it, you come through at Celtic, you're used to the expectation of having to win. There's only one place Celtic can finish, regardless of the team that you're playing in. Second place is the definition of first loser in Scotland.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you also look at Archibald, you look at, like you've just alluded to there, 22 years old. He's just the sort of player that Michael Appleton wants to work with. And I think, who was the lad he signed who went to Middlesbrough? Marvin Johnson? Yeah. Was it Johnson? And he signed him at Oxford, didn't he? He signed him for Oxford. Similar sort of player, kind of attacking wide player. Archibald's clearly got ability, and I think he proved that at Macclesfield. Yes, he hasn't proven himself in League One or the Championship on a regular basis, but like you say, when you come through the academy of a big club like Celtic or one of our big teams, of Liverpool and Manchester United, because they're similar sort of academies, really. Scotland, everything gravitates towards Celtic. He's clearly going to be able. And I know that looking at the press release, which I've put on my site, it should already have gone up already. But looking at the press release, Michael's excited that he's left-footed, but he gives options on either side of the park. I think we've also you've mentioned there about George Grant potentially being a 10. If we're going to settle with Grant as a 10, we're going to need additional options out wide. Harry, I think has got a fight on his hands this season. He's a decent player, but he can be described occasionally as a one-trick pony. Looks to go inside, goes outside, works 7 times out of 10. And Zach Elbazetti's
not a bad trick, is it?
No, it's not a bad trick. Yeah, I know he's strong and he's kind of. I think you and I, when we first saw him, we watched him early doors in his Lincoln career and said he could be our first £1 million player, which we're still kind of hoping for. But we never know. Right, let's have a look through some comments before we
just before you do that. I think it's really important to note he moved to Brentford. He didn't. He chose that. Celtic wanted to keep him.
Yeah, he wasn't
it's
released.
Not that he was released by Celtic and signed for Brentford. I think that's a really big thing. When you've got a club the size of Celtic trying to hang on to somebody and are mightily hacked off that he leaves, says an awful lot about the potential of the player, if not the current ability of him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to a lesser extent, it's not like Maxfield released him either. So we've not gone and picked up a player who's been released from a League Two club. And I think the same goes for some of our other signings. When you look at Conor McGrandles and Joe Walsh, both were wanted by MK Dons in our division. You look at Ethan Ross, who I know has come in as kind of a second keeper, but he was wanted by Colchester. So we're not picking up kind of the waifs and strays, so to speak. Right, so let's first of all have a look at some comments. You must bear with me. So Steve Dates, Theo Archibald, yes it is, my friend. James Quickfall has already got a song, Theo, which is another Theo, actually, former Lincoln player signed for Port Vale today, Mr. Robinson. So Simon Chanter, our good friend Sid, says good player. Ben's clearly happy, yeah boy. Lee Addlesey agrees that we definitely need strikers. What else have we got? Keeper Gogo told you he was going to sign Tim Hochin. Okay, sometimes some of our better signings have come from teams who are perennial strugglers, such as Taylor, Fletcher, Forrester. So again, you can't, I think what Pete's just alluded to there, you can't actually judge anybody from the team that they come from, because everybody started somewhere. It was funny, I was listening to the Kevin Ellison podcast earlier as well, and he was obviously a great professional throughout the ages, and I think he started at Altrincham and a couple of other non-league teams. So Luke had real competition, but has lots of potential which fits the mould. Dom Clark, Archibald clearly needs some love to bring out the best, and he's only 22. Well, if he needs some love, we'd better not get him on the video or the podcast, because we don't do love on these two outlets, do we? Stephen Bond.
Just get him in a toff mask and let Ben speak to him, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. I don't know who's Ben's going to idolise this season. We'll have to see. Ben, if you're in the comments, who is it going to be now? You've lost Toff and you've lost Bozzy. We seem to have depth in the wide positions. Do you think this could see Harry sold? Pete?
No, because you won't get the cash for him that you would. Because I think you're more likely to see Harry sold at Christmas if he starts every game and he's playing really well than go now. I'd be very, very, very surprised. I still think he's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, I don't think new arrivals at this stage necessarily mean outgoings. Joe Walsh, to be fair, kind of did put pressure on the defensive area, but when we signed Jackson and Monsma, there was no talk of Colt Bowles leaving at that point. If we sign two more wide players, then arguably we might want Harry off the wage bill. But I think that Harry fits the bill of the Appleton player a little closer than Bolger, than Payne, than Coker, because all of those players were a certain age or a certain position. Whereas
than Eardley. Yeah,
exactly. I think with Harry, you've got a young player, approaching 150, 200 games for us. I'm not sure quite how many he's played at the moment. We're not going to let him walk away for nothing. Absolutely not. So, Neil Tunstall will be playing a team of all under 24s except for Captain Bridgecut. I think Jackson's older, isn't he? I don't know how Tom Hopper is.
Joe Walsh?
Yeah, I think Joe Walsh is 26 as well. I don't know. You can't win anything with kids, Alan Hansen once said, and I think we know what happened after that. Pete and I have spoken several times about the need for experience, but do you think, Pete, at the moment that we've got levels of experience in certain key areas?
I think the point there as well is the point that the Big Apple makes himself, that experience isn't your age. Experience is your experience. And you can be 20, 21, 22 and have far more footballing experience than a 26, 27-year-old that's sat. How many career games has Bridcut played? Bridcut's have been injured a lot. I would prepare to put money on the fact that there will be another player in the Lincoln squad who is within 100 career games of Bridcut, despite the fact that there's probably nobody within 6 or 7 years of him.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think when you look at, McGrandles, Jones and Jackson are classic examples of that, because Jackson, I think, is 26, 27, hasn't played anywhere near the amount of games that 24-year-old James Jones has. So again, experience, you can be misled. I know that, Michael's rhetoric, his experience is all about appearances. I think some of it is about age. I think certain players change with age in certain positions. I wouldn't want to go into a season with, for instance, two 22-year-old centre-backs, I don't think, because they wouldn't have the level of experience in terms of age or position, age or appearances. But, maybe that's just me.
22 centre-backs made his debut as a 17-year-old, played 150 first team games. No, I'm just saying, I don't agree. I think two 22-year-old centre-backs that have played 150 games each, you're in a much better position. 25-year-old centre-back that's played 50 first team games.
Well, let us know what you think in the comments, people. Is it? Would you be okay with that or not?
Who's the lad that scored the winner in the European Cup final last night? 24 years of age. That was his 20th major trophy.
I don't watch. I know. Yeah, two 24-year-olds I can handle.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, so 22-year-olds Alan Hansen, 24-year-olds fine. Just as long as we know where we draw the line.
To be fair, I didn't watch the Champions League final. I just know PSG didn't win it, which delighted me. Got good.
Right, which really delighted me.
Got a good comment here from Reece Marshall. Do you think that Grant will play central this season? I think he looked fantastic down the middle when he played there. I'll pick this up first of all. I think Grant can play through the centre. I think he's one of those players that tends, he kind of likes the flamboyant a little bit as well. I think if you are, if he plays as part of the double sixes, I think that he's more comfortable. I think the 10 role, I'm not so sure. And I know, again, with Pete and I have had this discussion. I like Grant as a wide player. I know he's not naturally pacey, but I think he's good cutting in. I think if we tend to tuck those wide players in and want to narrow our attack, he's perfectly suited to that. He can play on either side as well. Whereas I see the likes of Archibald and Elbouzedi more as the kind of the flying winger, the dipping in and out with the pace. I can see Grant being used centrally. I personally don't think that that's where Mike Clapperton will play him. I think he'll probably look to maybe even push James Jones into the 10 if the situation arises. Pete?
I think it depends exactly what formation he plays, because the 10 is an interesting term. Grant is a far more attacking option than Jones in that kind of role. My criticism of Lincoln across probably the last 2 or 3 seasons would be that whoever has played in that number 10 role, and there's been a variety of different players that have played there, haven't ever scored enough goals. And if Grant is going to play in that role, is he going to get into double figures in the league? Doubt it.
I think he was out wide when he hit 15 for Notts County, wasn't he? I think he was playing out wide and cutting in as well. I agree with you. Probably the best number 10 that we've had in the last 3 or 4 years in terms of goal return was Shane McCartan. To be fair to him, I think he hit 7 or 8, didn't he? 7 or 8, I think, off the top of my head. And they were all the things.
Brilliant goal away at Swindon, but
2 or 3 brilliant goals. But yeah, it wasn't enough. And Akindi, that was, it was John's first season, wasn't it? And Akindi often looked isolated, I think, a little bit as well. But we struggled for that, because when Jack Payne arrived last year, I kind of ranted and raved about how brilliant he was going to be. I still think that's the key role. Even you can put your Archibalds one side, your Andersons, your Grants, you can have your Tom Hopper up front. But I've absolutely got to get that 10 nailed. And for me, that's still the one position that we're just hoping to fill.
Perhaps with a loan signing.
Yeah, I think a youngster from an academy may be suited to that 10 role. Or, I know we've talked about Callum Morton's been mentioned. He's the kind of player that maybe he was feeding off for Dane Oliver last time. If he is on our radar, I think he might be somebody that could fit in there as well.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'll get abused for this. I think he'd be a better signing than Tyler Walker.
Yeah, I think we've had this discussion on a walk at some point as well. I think in terms of outlay and return, I think he might be a better signing. I think in terms of flexibility, potentially, I don't know. I'm not going to say if we sign Tyler Walker that it's not a brilliant signing, because it would be. The one thing Walker has done.
Both of them would be even better.
Yeah, yeah. All right. You just won Euro Millions, but I think with Morton, you've got like 3 or 4 months of outstanding football in the senior game. With Walker, you've got at least 2 seasons. He was excellent for Mansfield and excellent for us. So let's have a quick look. Kate is firmly on your side. Doesn't care how old they are. If they're good enough, they're old enough. We had a maths teacher who used to think like that. Kate, was any bothered when Fred was young when he was a first team regular? I don't think the argument is about having first team regulars who are 19, 20, 21. Absolutely not. It's about having an older, calmer head. And I think when I made my comment about 22-year-olds, something that games don't give you is the cool head. I was a completely different person at 22 to 28 in terms of how you react to certain situations as well. But then I suppose
you're a Burke of both.
You didn't know me when I was 28. What have we got? So we've got James Quickfall. Ideally need a 15 plus goal scorer. Of course, Tyler would be excellent. Can't see it. Not happening. Genuinely isn't happening. Kev Barwise, how did he end up at Mactown? Never seen him play if Big Apple is happy. Well, maybe late to the party, Kev. But he was basically Celtic, then to Brentford. But he had a bad time at Brentford. There's a story on the website, on the article that I've just done. Basically says he went away with Brentford, one of his first away trips, didn't realise he wasn't allowed to ordered room service, and was sent home from the tour because it was banned, but he didn't know that. But he said he could have reacted differently to it, so I think that's an issue. So let's have a look. Another question, another point. John Leonard, apart from Ilias Chair, I thought Archibald gave the best individual performance from an opposition player at Sincilbank. Yeah, I mean, Ilias Chair was absolutely superb. But Archibald was great. He was I think Forest Green deserved to beat us. I was in the director's box for that with Terry, with Terry Cooper, Mark's dad. Excuse me. And afterwards, as you know, I'm not always complimentary about Forest Green, but I had to be. I know, shocking, isn't it? But I had to be complimentary about Forest Green because I thought they were excellent out there, and I thought they did deserve to beat us. And I think it was only Kellen Gordon's late goal that did it for us. So. So any more comments, Mr. Summers, before we wind up?
No, just hopefully now, end of the week, 2 or 3 more in and squad will be complete.
Well, you've got a fan here, Pete. Can we get Pete on more often? He makes some excellent, well thought out points.
I didn't know you were related, Kate.
Do you know what? I can't get him on all that often because some of his excellent, well thought out points make their way into my blogs not long after we spoke on the telephone.
but the good point is you always credit me with my thoughts, don't you, Gary?
Yes, I do. I think you are. Could you say that you're the Dominic Cummings to my Boris Johnson?
Oh, fuck off. And that's why I'm not on more often.
Kevin McCarthy makes a really good point here. Fosu Henry for Oxford, maybe. I think that's talking about the young players. Fosu Henry was released by Charlton, went into Oxford, had 6 months, and then I think it was $3.5 million him and Shannon Baptiste moved to Brentford, funnily enough, in January. So yeah, that's quite good. So
Anne was in and around the Brentford squad as well, so it wasn't like he just signed for Brentford and then disappeared. He's played games there. No,
exactly. Yeah, he has. Ben is getting a complex. Ben, Kate, that sounds like I'm being replaced.
I think the word is upgraded, Mr. Ward.
Obviously, but the podcast is absolutely unaffected whatsoever. But of the 3 of us, apparently it's me and Pete that have the face for video. Actually, I think Ben's getting dealt harsh with there, isn't he? We've got the radio faces, So.
I've got a face for radio. I'm not sure I've got the voice for it.
Ben, actually, he's got quite a silky, smooth kind of baritone voice, hasn't he?
Ben, that's called a compliment.
Yes, Ben, that is a compliment. It is a compliment. I used one of our pods the other day to try and send myself to sleep, but this annoying ginger prick kept coming in and speaking. Right, so that's everything. Thank you, Pete, for joining us. People will be back on the live show at some point. We'll drop you off the screen now. Don't go anywhere, mate. I'll say bye to you myself in a second. So that was Pete. That was Theo Archibald signing for Lincoln City. Fantastic signing, in my opinion. I like a flying winger. I like players that have got pace, that have got a little bit of trickery in them and that sort of thing. So I think that this is exciting. Look, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in once again. We've been in the bar. I've done a video, so I'm going to play out with the video as well. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully, we'll be back later in the week with some news. We never know. But until then, stay safe.
Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white, the imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white, the imps are here to stay.